Hello, so you're with Property Mythbusters. I'm Debra Beck-Mewing.
I'm Ken from Avvora Finance broker.
And I'm Gilmovich from Real Property Manager.
We're here to bust the myths around the contradictions and misleading information in the property investing space. And today we're talking about the myth around whether lenders will reject people with bad credit. So as our mortgage broker and finance specialist, Ken, we'll get you to kick off.
Sure. So I guess a good place to start is the what is bad credit. So bad credit is just essentially having a credit contract, whether that's a credit card, personal loan, any type of loan really, and not abiding by those within that contract and not making repayments or not paying it on time or not paying at all. So that's what bad credit generally is. And will lenders reject people with bad credit? It's probably maybe. So what actually happens is with bad credit, if it's a couple of hundred, generally some lenders are able to accept that, and if it's been paid and settled in full, they're able to overlook that. But if it's a bigger amount or it's unpaid and things like that, sometimes you are going to need to look to other areas. So that just means that the number of lenders that are available decreases. If your credit is really credit score and credit record is not that great, even going through bankruptcy, after you're discharged bankrupt, there are still lenders out there, but it's just the numbers get less and less as the credit history gets worse and worse.
And the actual definition of what is considered to be bad credit, like I was thinking, well, you have to have an absolute pristine history and you have to keep your credit score absolutely into like the thousands, like really high level, but there's not all that many things that come into it, is there, when you're actually deciding, who's got the bad credit?
There's, each lender has their own way to calculate or to do all the parameters and do credit scoring internally. So they tweak that based on what they feel their risk appetite is. But there isn't too much. Generally speaking, they just need, if you've got a credit card and you pay that off regularly, that's credit history, because it's sometimes they get a little bit nervous if there's no credit history at all. So they've got nothing to go off, whether it's good or bad. It's kind of having a credit card or some sort of loan and making those repayments, just showing that you're paying it down, can kind of build up your credit history.
And does it mean that sometimes you might still get the loan, but you might not be able to borrow as much?
Generally, from my experience, is just more the lenders will either accept that is on your record or not, and if not, you've got to go to a different lender. And then with a different lender, sometimes it just means, because they're taking a bigger risk from a commercial perspective, so the interest rates aren't as competitive.
Ken, what does an actual credit rating metric look like? Like, what is it? Is it out of 100, 500, 1,000? Is it 1 out of 5, 3 out of 5?
I'm
what does
actually
metric look like?
I was
curious.
No, that's an interesting question. I'll probably look into that in a little bit more detail, because there's a lot of with the lenders themselves and the credit assessors. Sometimes they don't even get visibility on what that is. So if so some lenders don't even credit score it at all. But sometimes if an application is knocked back because of credit scoring, the assessors themselves within the banks don't even know what particular item it was that knocked them out. It's literally just an automatic decision thing.
Right.
So you get a score.
So the paperwork goes through a computer and it spits out the other end saying
and so you can
so
the lender can actually tweak what they're looking for, what they feel is this, what is deemed good, because they also sometimes take into account, like whether you change employments regularly, whether you change, your address and things like that. So there's a whole lot of things, but some lenders don't. Some don't even look at credit scoring, and they just actually look at the application and have an assessor, go through it themselves. So then, in that case, yes, you will be able to work out what exactly it was that was.
And so, from your perspective, it's a little bit even more, like you go into it in more detail, don't you? From the rental.
Yeah, so as a property manager, we've got to make a decision whether that particular tenant is financially able to meet the rent. I mean, that's a crucial component of approving an applicant. But as property managers, we're very limited through the application process. Applications are obviously different to loan applications. And there's only a certain amount of information that we can capture on the paper application or online application. So one of the things we look for is our job is really to verify what they're actually putting on their application form as being true or not. So we're collating evidence such as pay slips. So if they're claiming that their salary is $150,000 a year, we just can't take that as face value, and we need to go deeper and, in fact, verify that. Now that could be directly with the HR department, or we collect the pay slips or the copy of the work contract. So we've got to go a little bit deeper. And we almost have to assess that there is enough income there, whether they're a single person or a couple or family, and are able to meet the repayments. And we see that as no different to mortgage repayments. Rent repayments, well, they're just, they're utilising a property that they don't own, not dissimilar to a bank who's given a mortgage to someone. The homeowner doesn't own that property at that particular time, and they're paying a loan off for the privilege of living there. We see that pretty much a similar correlation to paying rent. And of course, we want to know that previously, if they have rented, that they've actually met those obligations as well. So the magic document for us is the tenant history ledger, which all property management software produces, and that's a document, that's a crucial document that we're after. That tells us transparently what is going on in the history of that rental property that they previously rented. And of course, that is also used for future reference as well. If they're trying to apply interstate or overseas, let's say they move to the UK, the property managers there are doing exactly the same thing. Really? They're looking at that very, very closely.
Local
it's a global. It definitely is, because the landlords want to know that they've in fact been doing the right thing and meeting those repayments and repayments on time, because as we know, that affects the investor's cash flow if they're not paying any rent or defaulting. This is quite serious. And the second layer of that is we will do a credit check. So most property managers will be subscribing to some sort of tenancy data default database. There's several out there in the marketplace, and some are more sophisticated than others. For example, the one I use checks the tenant against 20 different government departments. And that checks their ID, visa status as well, and any bankruptcy or court orders that are live and in action. So and of course rent default.
Yeah, like that. How long have people been doing that? Because I don't remember it being that hard when I rented.
Well, tenancy databases have been around for a long time.
Oh, right.
We're probably going to about mid-90s when they started, but they weren't as sophisticated, and as technology evolves, and government departments collaborated more, that information is accessible. And of course, we don't do it in secret. The tenant actually signs disclaimer that they accept that we'll be doing that. No difference to a private consent statement is signed off on.
That makes sense.
And gives permission to the property manager to go and do that. And check their file.
Yeah, but weren't you saying that the tenancy records were not necessarily considered.
The conversation we were having around the tenancy history and repayments. Is it a ledger? Is that
so the question is, would a tenancy history ledger be used or asked for if that tenant happens to be applying for a loan? A property loan.
I haven't come across that scenario, and I haven't heard of a case where a lender does request that particular ledger. The only time, because it's not classified and it doesn't fall under bad credit or anything if they do miss rent payments, because it's not a credit contract. But lenders are still curious whether the character of the applicant, how they perform, and whether they're trustworthy and things like that. Maybe if it was under the genuine savings, if they needed to prove genuine savings, they could possibly request the ledger to show that there's regular payments, because then that can then be offset and put towards to service the loan. So it's just showing that there's the ability to put money away and things like that, which is where the genuine savings comes in. And sometimes they do look at a rental ledger to show that there have been regular payments.
So if there was, for example, a pattern of rent payments not being met on time, and it's quite regular, would that not ring a few alarm bells?
Yeah, 100%. Sometimes, from what I would, foresee in terms of what the lender would do, the credit assessor will probably look at it and start asking questions about why was that rent late? Was it due to an illness or injury preventing, with issues with cash flow, which was, very contained, or whether it was just an ongoing thing, or they didn't, they just didn't manage it well,
or financial hardship, or
so they do take that into consideration, and depending on what the answer is, if they're comfortable with it, they'll go ahead with it. If they're not, they'll not approve the loan. So it's up to what the bank's policy is.
And so just picking things up from my perspective, when I'm talking to people from a strategic look at making their next purchase, if there is a bit of a history with bad credit, once again it does depend on the situation, but really people just need to understand it's a big commitment and they need to just hold their horses. So if you've already got a property and then all of a sudden the bad credit sort of comes into it, then maybe the approach should be with your property is to look at earning an income from some other, through some other strategy with the property that you have already. So it's something like putting a granny flat on the back, or trying to add another master suite in the roof. Of course, you do need, in some cases, credit to do that. So maybe,
interesting.
Maybe you'd have to look at an approach with that. But really, if there is a bit of a history of bad credit, people do need to just take the time to get that sorted out. It can just be cleaned up like over a 6-month or 12-month period. There's always going to be market downturns as well as upswings. If it's not going to be in the area close to where you live, there's over 12,000 suburbs in Australia, so there's always some market that's performing. But really, this conversation has been quite timely for today because we've had the Westpac class action announced, and we were having a little bit of a joke in that I did say to John, maybe we should talk about this today, and John said, yes, irresponsible lending as opposed to irresponsible borrowing, because the borrowers themselves, or when you're talking mortgage broking, they do say that the bank is the borrower. Is that right? No. Anyway, let's not get.
So this is not the first case. This is not the first case to come out where property investors have started a lawsuit against the bank.
Yeah, that's right.
Saying we're blaming the banks because
they gave us too much money.
And so there's going to be obviously an accountability debate as to who, you know, who's to blame here. It is definitely an interesting case, and we'll be watching closely what happens with this. But it's a two-way street, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I find it interesting because I think previously interest-only loans, when they were put in, when we were doing the servicing to see if an applicant can borrow that amount of service that loan, it's been recently, and I say that recently as in like 12 months or a little bit more, they introduced using the actual principal and interest repayment, not the interest-only period repayments for servicing. So that's significantly higher than during that interest-only period. So it could be interesting in terms of, because the banks have kind of clued on that needs to be included. Anyone who kind of was assessed under the older policy, because these policies change, they tighten, they loosen, and things like that. So it's quite.
I understand the class actions.
Off the back of
the class actions going back to 2011.
Yeah, so
things were a little bit loose.
So they bought they bought 10 properties in 3 years on interest only.
This is the example.
I can imagine that would be
on an average salary. Yeah.
Well, if they were cash flow massively cash flow positive, maybe you could do it. But I guess we should. Yeah. We can address.
We'll watch this space.
That's right.
We'll watch this space and maybe have a Property Mythbusters just around that.
I'll throw in there as well, like in terms of credit and things like that. Yep, I will. If they do, want to take on debt and things like that, don't think about what the bank's assessing and things like that and borrowing to the hilt. Be prudent. Think about what you're wanting to do, whether it fits your particular strategy and profile and risk before making a decision and applying for that loan. I think that's important as well.
Okay,
that's it.
That's
well, okay. All right. Well, thanks for watching. You've been with us for just over 10 minutes, and we've learned a lot at Property Mythbusters. And if you would like to keep in touch with us, please join the Property Mythbusters group on Facebook. And you're welcome to, of course, private message us for any questions, or find us through our own social media pages.